Everyone thought Prince Harry had chosen the point of no return. He gave up his royal title, left the monarchy, settled in America, and mentally attacks family on television and in his memoir. A man walking away from golden lineage carrying wounded pride and a rage that never truly slept. But few knew that after all the accusations and the seemingly permanent rupture, he was the one who came knocking, asking to come home. Not out of remorse, but for another reason, private, profound, and strong enough to leave the royal family in stunned silence. The problem? The door had already been locked, and the one holding the key wasn't just King Charles, the father he once called cold and distant, but also the hearts that had long since frozen over Camilla, William, and even Meghan herself. It was a dazzling morning in California. Inside the million-dollar villa in Montecito, Harry sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in hand, the vacant eyes. Meghan was saying something about her new podcast recording schedule, and Archie played with Lego bricks in the corner. But Harry wasn't listening. His mind drifted back to vague memories, the blinding lights of Buckingham Palace, the crisp suits, the echo of footsteps down marble corridors, and his mother's laughter. "Daddy, why doesn't Grandpa ever call me Archie?" Looked up, his voice innocent. The question landed as an unexpected blow. Harry froze. He set his coffee down and pressed his lips together. Meghan paused, a flicker of unease in her eyes, but she said nothing. No responses, not because Harry didn't know, but because he wasn't ready to confront it. Since stepping back from royal duties in 2020, Harry had tried to build a new life, independent, free, unshackled from the constraints of a monarchy he had always found suffocating. He had written a memoir, produced documentaries, appeared on television to tell his truth. But after each interview, each revelation, he came to realize nothing could replace the feeling of belonging, especially when he watched his children grow up without any relations to their roots. That night, Harry didn't sleep. He lay alone on the sofa, a laptop perched on his lap. After several false starts, typing, deleting, and starting again, he finally composed an email to Sir Edward Young, King Charles III's most senior aide. "I understand I have no position within the royal family. I'm not asking for reinstatement. I only wish to meet my father as a son. No press, no cameras, no Meghan, just the two of us at Sandringham. If this is not possible, I will understand." He pressed send. For the first time in years, his heart thudded, not from anger, but from fear of rejection. 3 days passed. Silence. Harry checked his inbox obsessively, then forced himself to stop. He said nothing to Meghan. He didn't want to hide it, but he feared she might intervene, or worse, she would try to protect him from disappointment. He began to feel foolish, like a forgotten son writing letters into the void, waiting for an answer from a father who once declared, "Family is an institution, not an emotional bond." He still hoped. A week later, Harry attended a charity gala in Los Angeles. He wore a tuxedo, smiled at cameras, shook hands with familiar faces. But when the lights dimmed and he slipped backstage, he glanced at his phone. Nothing. No email. No missed calls. No word from London. He didn't feel angry anymore, just tired. Another morning. Archie played on the swing in the garden while Harry sat alone in his room. He looked up at an old photo from his wedding in 2018. His father stood beside him without any emotion. At the time, Harry thought it was formality. Now he recognized it as distance, a wall between two men bound by blood, but little else. He remembered his childhood. Whenever he was scolded, his mother, Princess Diana, comforted him. His father said nothing. "That's how he was raised," his mother used to whisper. But when she died, that silence turned into a blank that was never filled. Harry didn't blame his father for not calling his grandson. He blamed himself for burning the bridges and now foolishly hoping for forgiveness. That evening, Meghan noticed his quiet. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her eyes sharp. Harry shook his head. "No, just tired." She paused, then said gently, "We chose this path. We shouldn't look back." "I know," he replied, "but sometimes it's not about choosing a new path. Sometimes it's just not walking the old one anymore," without knowing what that really means. A week later, at the top of hopelessness, Harry's phone buzzed. An email, no subject line. The sender, private secretary to H.M. the King. "His Majesty acknowledges the request. The King wishes to consider. No further details at this time." Just a few lines, no invitation, no rejection, but not silence either. Harry read it over and over. It felt like standing before a half-open door, unsure if it would open or slam close forever. The next day, Meghan took Archie to his art class at the community center. Harry stayed home with Lilibet. While changing her diaper, soft music played in the background, but his thoughts circled back to the email. The king wishes to consider. A part of him wanted to book the next flight to London, appear unannounced and make a statement. But he knew better. Without formal approval, it would backfire. The media would pounce, headlines would explode, and the fragile goodwill still hanging by a thread would vanish. He looked at Lilibet, her bright eyes and golden hair like Diana's. He snapped a photo on his phone. For a moment, he considered sending it to his father with a simple caption, "Your granddaughter almost 3 now," but he didn't. He knew Charles had never replied before. At dinner, Meghan said, "My agent heard from the cut they want a follow-up interview. Just a quiet one here at home." Harry nodded absently. "If you're up for it, go ahead." She put down her cutlery. "You've been different lately. Are you all right?" He looked at her. "I've just been thinking about family, about my father, and what we've lost." She went quiet. A flicker of unease crossed her face. She had believed they had left everything behind. But now Harry being pulled back to a place she no longer belonged. "Harry," she said softly, "you don't owe them anything. If they wanted to see the children, they will. They could write, call, or come. They haven't." "I know," Harry replied quietly, "but this isn't about them. It's about me." That night, he dreamt of his mother. In the dream, Diana stood on the lawn at Highgrove wearing her favorite cream jumper, her hair gently tousled by the breeze. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him. Not sad, not angry, just loving. When he awoke, his eyes stung. He sat up, glanced at Meghan, still sleeping beside him, and stepped out onto the balcony. Mist rolled over the Santa Ynez Hills. He wondered if Mother were still here, would things be different? He already knew the answer. Yes, because Diana never turned her back on her children, even when the world turned its back on her. The next day, Harry opened his laptop and for the first time in months visited the official website of the British royal family. He looked at recent photos of his father shaking hands with the public, opening schools, delivering speeches in Parliament. A father, a king, but never both, not to him. He quietly searched for Sandringham Estate on Google Maps. He zoomed in on the woods behind the house where he and William once played hide and seek. Somewhere beneath those trees, they had buried a wooden box of secrets, a few coins, a napkin from their mother, and a photograph printed from a film camera. That box was probably rotted now, or dug up. But to Harry, it was the last remnant of a time when he believed his family was something sacred. That evening, once Archie had gone to bed, Harry returned to his study. He reopened the king's reply and read it once more. "His Majesty acknowledges the request. The king wishes to consider. No further details at this time." To consider meant it was not a refusal, not a promise, but it made his heart pound as if he had just cracked open a door he had slammed shut 3 years ago. At Clarence House, the private residence of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, the morning sun filtered through antique window panes. The king sat in his study wrapped in a silk dressing gown of deep blue, a printed copy of Harry's email in hand. He no longer read it, he simply stared. He had gone over it again and again and still couldn't decide what he felt. Was it emotion? Outrage? Suspicion? Camilla entered, carrying a breakfast tray. Her eyes flicked toward the half-folded letter. She didn't need to ask, she already knew who it was from. "Him again?" she asked with a sigh, setting the tray gently on the table. Charles didn't answer straight away. At last he said, "It's only a request. A meeting, no press, no public, no Meghan." "And you believe him?" Camilla poured the tea, not once taking her eyes off him. "You truly think he's coming with a pure heart, or is it just another chapter for the next memoir?" Charles frowned. He disliked her cynicism, but he couldn't deny she had a point. Perhaps he means it," he murmured. Camilla set her teacup down with quiet firmness and straightened her back. "Your Majesty, if you believe him now, you are betting everything we've rebuilt these past many years. Every press engagement, every effort William and Catherine have made will be meaningless." After a pause, she added, "Harry didn't just walk away. He burned every bridge after he walked. Publicly accused you of being cold, painted me as the homewrecker called William controlling, and now with one email he wants forgiveness." Charles closed his eyes. The words hurt, but they were true. That evening, William was summoned to Clarence House. He had barely stepped into the study before speaking. "I know," he said, not even bothering to sit. He wrote again. Camilla glanced at Charles, then quietly left the room, giving father and son their privacy. William sat across from his father, his gaze cool. I don't understand why you're hesitating. There's no apology, no explanation, just demands. He's still your brother, Charles said softly. And I'm the one dealing with the fallout, William replied. Every press conference, every public appearance, they ask about him. They chase after my wife, scrutinize my children. All because of what he says, then denies, then reaffirms in a book. This family can't be a revolving stage for whoever decides to walk in and out. A long silence stretched between them. Charles stood and moved to the window, looking out at the royal gardens. He was a lonely boy once, the king said quietly. As I used to be. William didn't reply. He understood. But empathy could not replace boundaries, especially when his trust had been shattered more than once. Meanwhile, back in California, Harry remained without further response. He began to feel like a man standing at a locked gate, knocking endlessly, while no one came to answer. One evening, Meghan found him scribbling something in his notebook. She glanced at the page, then asked gently, "You're still hoping?" Harry nodded. "I just want one chance. One conversation without noise, without interference." Meghan sat beside him, her voice calm but cautious. "I don't want to see you hurt again. They're not like us. They don't hug. They don't apologize. They don't say, 'I love you.' They act according to protocol, image, first duty always." "I don't want to return to the palace," Harry replied. "I just want to know if I'm still my father's son." She said nothing. She didn't object, but she didn't support it either. Days later, as Charles reviewed his schedule, his private phone rang, a secure line, encrypted, used only for internal royal communication. On the other end, Sir Edward's low voice. "Harry is still waiting." Charles gave no reply. An hour passed. Then, alone in the reading room, he phoned a familiar number that was kept secret since the days when he was still the Prince of Wales. The line connected. Harry's voice came through, faintly hoarse. "It's me?" Charles inhaled deeply. "I received your letter," he said, "and I've been thinking." Harry remained silent. He listened. "You say you want to return as a son, not for position? Then come as a son. No press releases, no film crews, no Meghan." "I agree," Harry said immediately. "Sandringham, this weekend. I'll come alone." A pause. "And Harry?" Charles hesitated. "Make sure no one else knows about this meeting." "I understand." The call ended, brief, formal, but enough. Enough for a father and a son to begin rebuilding a broken relationship. California. 2 a.m. Harry sat alone on the veranda, the dim porch light casting soft shadows across his face. An off-season rain was falling over Santa Barbara, steady and rhythmic, as though someone were gently drumming their fingers on the roof. In his hand was a plane ticket, a direct flight from Los Angeles to London, booked under an alias and sealed with strict discretion. He had purchased the ticket just hours after the call with his father. For the first time in years, something stirred within him. Not a media strategy, not a headline. Something deeper, something human. He hadn't told Meghan. Not out of secrecy, but necessity. This wasn't their battle. This was a meeting between father and son, no audience, no cameras. Just blood and bone, just hours earlier. At 10 p.m., with the house asleep, Harry's phone rang. A number from London, unsaved, unfamiliar. He hesitated, then answered. "Harry." The voice was low, rough, but unmistakable. "Charles." Harry stood abruptly. His hand trembled slightly. "Father," he asked, needing confirmation that it was real. "I won't speak long," Charles said. "But if you truly wish to return, you must come as a son." Harry swallowed. "I understand. Sandringham, Sunday. No one must know." Yes." Before ending the call, Charles added after a beat of silence, "Don't make me regret opening this door." Click. The line went dead. And in California, the rain began to fall quietly like a warning. The following morning, Harry drove Archie to school. On the way back, he made a single call to his manager. "Postpone all filming next week. Tell them it's a family matter." "What kind of family matter trumps the entire schedule?" the voice on the other end asked. Harry paused. "Going home," he said at last. Going home, words that once felt hollow now caught in his throat. That evening, Meghan found him folding clothes in the walk-in closet. "What are you doing?" she asked. Harry tucked a jacket into his travel bag, his tone measured. Father wants to see me. Your father, Megan blinked. He nodded. In London, Sandringham. She went silent, then with a quiet breath asked, You're going alone? Yes. The air thickened. Megan didn't raise her voice, but the silence between them was sharper than any protest. I'm not trying to stop you, she said gently. I just want you to be prepared. Even if they agree to meet, everything they say could still wound you. They haven't changed. I'm not going to reclaim anything, Harry replied. I'm going because there's one thing left I can't afford to lose. When will you leave? She asked softly. Can I come with you? Her voice was light, almost tender, as if suggesting her presence might make him reconsider protecting her from royal attacks in a few days. Harry zipped the bag and placed it in the corner. But that night at 11:50 p.m., the flight departed. On board, Harry wore a baseball cap and masked his true name, absent from any manifest. He took a window seat near the back. The cabin was dark and hushed, but he did not sleep. He stared outside, watching as the cloudy skies of England slowly took shape. Rain was pouring by the time he landed at Heathrow. A black armored Range Rover awaited him at the rear entrance of the terminal. No uniformed driver, no royal crest. Every step was discreet, like the quiet movement of a protected witness. Through the misted window, familiar landscapes emerged: winding roads, ancient oaks, distant fields. Each one unlocked memories of a simpler time when he was still the prince, still her little boy, walking these same lanes hand in hand with Diana. The journey to Sandringham took nearly 3 hours. Near the estate, the vehicle pulled over beside a wooded grove. Harry was instructed to walk the remaining path following his father's request. No security, no spotlight. Just a lone man entering sacred ground that once meant safety, but now a trial. At night, Sandringham was eerily quiet. Wind hissed through the pines. Harry walked down the gravel path, each step swallowed by the soft hiss of rain. He carried only a small bag, no recorder, no open phone for notes. Just one change of clothes and an old photograph, his mother arms around her 2 boys. An elderly butler opened the door. He didn't speak much, just nodded and led Harry to a side sitting room where a fire had already been lit. His Majesty will be with you shortly, the butler said, then left. Harry sat down on the worn leather armchair. The room hadn't changed: antique clocks, oil paintings of ancestors, and the familiar porcelain teacup he had once broken at age 12 now replaced. He looked up at the large portrait of King George VI, heart thudding. For a fleeting second, he was 13 again, sitting alone after Diana's funeral, waiting for his father to hold him, only to be met with a stiff handshake. The door opened. Charles entered, clad in a brown wool suit and gray scarf. No bodyguards, no Camilla. The 2 men stood facing each other. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence carried with it years of pain, resentment, and longing, waiting for someone to strike the match. You came, Charles said first. Harry nodded. I promised I would. I'm not certain I'll let you stay. I'm not asking to, Harry replied. I only asked to be heard. Charles looked into his son's eyes for the first time in years, truly looked. And what he saw wasn't defiance nor anger, just urgency. The eyes were Diana's, but the soul was bare. Not a husband, not a former prince, just a son without armor, without fortress. I will listen, Charles said, and then I will decide. The side drawing room at Sandringham was still as stone. The fire crackled gently in the hearth, casting a warm orange hue across the faces of 2 men seated opposite one another, one a king crowned by a nation, the other a son fractured by his past. It was Harry who broke the silence. I know. Everything I've done, what I said on television, what I wrote in the book, those are not things a father can easily forgive. But if I don't say what I came to say tonight, there may never be another chance. Charles said nothing. His eyes studied his son's hands interlocked upon his knees. The look was not angry, but cool, analytical, almost as though he were trying to discern whether the man in front of him was still a son or merely a storyteller angling for another narrative. Harry inhaled deeply. I don't want a title. I don't want security or status. I just want my children to have a grandfather. His voice caught. Archie's begun asking questions about you, about Uncle William. Lilibet doesn't know yet, but one day she will. And I've realized I can't keep painting a fantasy family and expect my children to believe in it. I can't use my wounds as weapons to wound them too. Charles blinked slowly. Something in that admission struck a nerve, something deep and long buried. A quiet admission to himself that perhaps at some point he had failed as a father. "I'm not angry that you left," Charles said at last, his voice low and even. "Everyone has a right to seek a life of their own." Harry looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "But," Charles continued, "I'm angry at the way you left. You ruined everything behind you." The words landed like tons of stones. "You spoke publicly about this family, criticized me, Camilla and William, then denied it, then confirmed it again in a later chapter. You made me look like a tyrant in the press. You made the world wonder, if a man's own son turns against him, what kind of king could he possibly be?" Harry bowed his head, his hands clenched. But this time he didn't defend himself. He didn't interrupt. He had learned to listen. "I know I was wrong," Harry said quietly. "I said things I shouldn't have. But back then I felt pushed out, ignored, seen as a liability. And I was angry that Mum died the way she did, angry that this family didn't protect her and didn't protect me." "I didn't protect your mother, that's true," Charles replied, gazing into the fire. "And I live with the shame of it every day." A long silence settled. The fire whispered, but something else flickered too. Something smaller, fainter inside the hearts of two men who had not truly understood one another in years. "Camilla never forbade anything," Charles said suddenly, as though reading Harry's unspoken thoughts. "It was I who didn't reach out, because I was afraid. Afraid of what Harry asked. Afraid that if I opened the door, you'd step through with a film crew, with a script, with the next version." Harry gave a dry chuckle, not mocking, but tired. "I'm not a brand anymore, Dad. I'm exhausted. Truly. If I were still working a narrative, I wouldn't have flown overnight with no one knowing." Charles didn't reply, but something in his gaze softened. "You may not be able to forgive me," Harry continued, "but if you can, at least let Archie and Lilibet know where they come from, that they have a grandfather and he's not just an image they find on Google." Charles stared at the portrait hanging above the mantel, his own taken the day he was crowned in the ceremonial robes of state. "Blood cannot be erased, but privilege can," he murmured. "You cannot renounce every duty and then return asking for the best of both worlds. A man must choose a path and live with its price." "I'm not asking for both," Harry cut in. "I'm only asking to still be your son." Charles looked up. Their eyes met, no longer steeled by pride or veiled with politics. Just two men stranded at a nameless crossroads, one path pride, the other kinship. At that precise moment, the door opened. Camilla stood there, no knock, no warning. In her hand, a folder, but her eyes locked instantly on Harry. Both men rose to their feet, not out of protocol, but out of instinct. A thick pause fell. "I'm sorry," she said coolly. "I didn't know anyone was here." "We're having a private conversation," Charles replied, his tone measured but firm. "Of course," Camilla said, gaze still fixed on Harry. "Family matters, though that term seems to mean little these days." Harry didn't respond. He met her gaze, neither hostile nor afraid. But gone was the boy who used to avoid her in the palace halls. She placed the folder gently on the table, then turned to leave. Before she exited, she paused. "You know my view," she said to Charles. "If you believe he won't turn this into another version for the public, then by all means believe it." The door shut behind her with a soft but decisive thud. The room felt colder. Charles said nothing. Harry stood still, shoulders square like a soldier awaiting judgment. "I know this isn't easy," Harry said softly, "but I promise no one else will know. No cameras, no new memoirs, just a return without an audience." Charles looked at him. His voice came low, husky. "A promise? At the wall?" Harry nodded. "I'm ready to keep it." Just hours after Harry left Sandringham, a short but explosive headline appeared on the front page of a British tabloid, "Prince Harry in secret meeting with King Charles at Sandringham." Signs of reconciliation. There were no photos, no official confirmation from the palace. But the story spread like wildfire. And this time, no member of the royal family moved to deny it immediately. In the world of media was as good as confirmation. In California, as Harry stepped out of the car in Montecito, Meghan was already waiting at the front door. In her hand, her phone screen glowed with the newly published headline. Her face was unreadable. "You didn't say a word," she said quietly but sharply. "Not a word." Harry stuffed his hands into his jacket pocket, stepping past her into the house. Meghan followed. "You thought you could make this some kind of private affair while the entire world watches our every behavior? You really believed this would stay secret?" Harry stopped in the living room and turned to her. "I didn't tell anyone. Neither did my father. It could have been a staff member, a driver, a security detail. I can't control everyone, but you could control the one person who matters most to me." Meghan cut in her eyes, now shimmering. "You chose to leave me out of it. You went back, alone even after I asked to come." "Because this was the problem between me and him," Harry replied, his voice softer now. "You've always stood by me, but this I needed to do myself." Meghan clenched her fists. "So what is it you're after, his forgiveness or your place in the line of succession?" Harry shook his head. "I don't need a throne. I just need to give my children roots." Meghan turned away, shielding her expression. Meanwhile, in a private chamber inside Clarence's house, Camilla raised the first voice. She held in her hand a stack of printed pages, excerpts from Harry's memoir lines brimming with bitterness, accusations that never leak for the ears of a family, let alone the eyes of the international press. "Have you read this again?" she asked Charles, tapping one damning sentence in particular. "I begged my father not to marry her." Her voice sharpened. "Is this really someone you still wish to call your son?" Charles said nothing. His gaze drifted past her, out through the window where London's fog draped itself across the old stone steps like an omen. Camilla's voice dropped to a harsher register. "He called me the woman who broke the family, described me as a cunning fox who manipulated the monarchy like some sordid puppet show. And now, after torching every bridge, he returns, wearing the pitiful eyes of a lost little boy." Charles lifted a hand to his temple, a gesture of weary containment. "Harry is my son, Camilla. Whatever has been said or done, that does not change." Her reply was swift and stinging. "And what of me?" she asked. "I am your wife, the woman who endured decades of hostility just to stand beside you. I will not be asked to share you with someone who dragged my name through every tabloid in the Western world." The air between them thickened like a gathering storm. Camilla continued, softer now, but far more dangerous for it. "If you bring him back, you won't only be hurting me. You'll be sending a message to the nation that their king is swayed by sentiment, that the crown can be manipulated by tears. You are a sovereign, Charles. You cannot be both father and redeemer to a rebel." That same afternoon, William arrived at the palace. His expression as ever revealed little, but the glint in his eyes was colder than usual. He did not ask how his father was, nor did he sit long before speaking. "I've heard about his trip." Charles gave a quiet nod. "This isn't simply a matter of father and son," William said flatly. "This is symbolic. If you open the gates, the world will see forgiveness for a traitor. If you keep them closed, they will see discipline." Charles exhaled. "And what would you have me do?" Without a word, William produced a folded note from the inside pocket of his coat and placed it gently before his father. It was a memorandum drawn up by his communications team. The line at the top read, "Strategic Image Guidance. Maintain the position that the Duke of Sussex holds no official role. Avoid any actions that may be construed as his reintegration into royal life." Beneath it, scrawled in William's own hand, a single sentence stood out. "I lost my mother to the media. I will not lose my father the same way." Charles read the words slowly. Though seated in the very heart of his kingdom, he felt strangely adrift, like a man stranded in his own throne room. That evening, he took no supper. He did not see Camilla. Instead, he withdrew to his study and asked not to be disturbed. And in the quiet of the Balmoral dusk, he began to write a letter longhand with no seal, no title, no crest. A father's letter. Monday morning, Buckingham Palace pulsed with its usual rhythm meetings, with Commonwealth envoys, ceremonial briefings, national updates. The wheels of monarchy turned steadily, undisturbed by the tremors of a prodigal son's quiet return. But in a private study at Clarence House, King Charles III was not looking at his calendar. On his desk lay a sheet of plain paper, no crest, no royal seal. Just a single page inked slowly and deliberately, nothing like the formal dispatches of his daily life. He had rewritten it 3 times during the night. "My son, I will not reopen the old door. But if you choose to stand outside and still call yourself my son, I will always be looking out." There was no signature, no date, but it was one of the most honest things he had ever written. Charles folded the letter gently and handed it to a trusted aide. "Don't send it through royal channels," he said quietly. "Have it delivered like any ordinary letter. No copies." In California, the afternoon was peaceful. Meghan was trimming flowers in the garden when she noticed the postman leave a small envelope on the front step. It was plain, no stamp, no name. She brought it inside, turned it over, then placed it silently on the table in front of Harry. She asked nothing. Harry picked it up and immediately recognized the handwriting. He read the short note, then stood still for a long time. He understood. It wasn't a reconciliation, it was a punctuation mark. Not an ending, but the necessary full stop to a chapter that had stretched too long, too painfully. A week later, the Scottish spring air was still crisp. At Balmoral, once Queen Elizabeth's summer sanctuary, King Charles arrived early for Ash Wednesday Mass at the Crathie Kirk. After the service, instead of returning to the castle, he stood alone at the tall window overlooking the front grounds. An elderly aide stepped beside him and whispered, "Someone is here, Your Majesty." Charles nodded slightly. Not long after, a gray rental car stopped by the front drive. From it stepped a man in a woolen cap carrying a small child with dark curls and a firm grip around his father's neck. They didn't approach the castle. They remained at a distance, standing on the dewy grass, eyes fixed on the tall window above. No waves, no greetings, no photographers, only eyes, only presence. A grandson sees his grandfather, not as a prince, not in ceremony, but in something quieter family. The royal gates didn't open, but in that moment, Charles wasn't a monarch bound by protocol and institution. He was a father, and he had chosen to look out, not down. No titles, no press statements, just one thing that returned: family ties.